Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Code and Pixels podcast. My name is Kelly, and I'm once again joined by my amazing co host, Adekunle. And today we'll be chatting with Jina Anne about leveling up in design systems.
Thanks, Kelly. Um, so a little background about Gina. Gina is the founder of Clarity, which is the first design system conference we have ever had. Um, but yeah, Gina, thanks for being on the show. How are things going?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, things are going good.
Love it, love it. Cool. Let's jump into the first question. So, can you describe your career path from your first job and to where you're at right now?
Mm, First job in design or just first job at all? Because I go way back.
Oh, I don't think we want to go that way back,
Yeah.
but maybe talk about like your first design tech
Sure.
job.
Okay. Think would probably be my internship I had when I was an undergrad. And that was actually when I worked on my first design system because I was doing a style guide as part of the project I was working on. And we actually were using Quark to document not just the brand, but also the code. So imagine like laying out a PDF deliverable for all that. But that was in 2004. So that was like literally 20 years ago. Just wild to think about. Um, I guess my first job in tech would be a couple years after that. I was recruited to work at Apple. Um, and so I moved from Memphis to the Bay Area. And I guess, yeah, that was my first tech job. That was like 2007. And I was working on the e-commerce store for, Apple. Back then, there was like a separate store.apple.com from like the rest of the site. Now it's all kind of blended together. Um, but yeah, I started out as a front end developer and then moved over about a year after that into the design team because I had FOMO. I wanted to do design. And then when I was on the design team, I had FOMO for dev. It was very separate. But yeah, I was doing some design systems work alongside my other work while I was there. And then I've hopped around a lot since then because, as I said, that was 20 years ago almost. So I've been at um, some other design agencies. I've been at some tech companies like Salesforce, which is probably the most notable part of my career. There was also Amazon. There was my most recent time was at Google. Um, but it was at the time that I was working at Salesforce, which was about 2014 when I moved over to the core team. So 10 years ago was when my design systems was like full time what I was doing rather than something I was doing along the side of my work.
Damn, oh, that's I need to step my game up. Uh, yeah, that's great to hear. So, next question I want to talk about is that your work on the design tokens working group.
Mhm.
Yeah, you started that 4 years ago, and you're the co-chair. Can you kind of talk about what is the working group's like main objective, and where do you see it going in the near future?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it all kind of started from like a Twitter conversation, but basically we had just noticed that some design tools were starting to roll out design tokens as a feature. But everybody was kind of going about it in their own way. And um, also like not just design tools, but like developer tools were also kind of doing their own thing. And so we wanted a standard way for design tokens as a language, I guess you could say, to be implemented. We felt that, not as like a controlling thing, but more of like, if we can like help implementers like with the basic stuff, like how to roll out design tokens at a basic language level, then they can focus more on like the innovative features that they want to add. And so, yeah, we started, it was like Kayla, it was started by Kayla. Kayla worked with me during my time at Salesforce, which I should probably mention is where design tokens came from. Um, and so it was like him, me, and Danny kind of got together to think through like the mission, and um, we even we did a working session where we came up with the principles for the community, which you can see on the homepage of the website, designtokens.org. Um, and then, yeah, we gathered a group of people together and or like editors to focus on like different areas. So like there's like the general format, but then you have like focused areas like color or I guess you could say like spacing, sizing, like measurement type stuff. I think like all the different categories you could think of for design tokens have like focus editors on that. And we rolled out like a draft of the I don't know if you would call it like I guess it's kind of like an API for like design tokens. And it's been really cool to see that like a lot of design tools have already started putting that to practice and how they've implemented design tokens. Some of them might put their own spin on things, but generally like it's been getting adopted, which is really great. And, obviously we want to keep developing further into those categories I was talking about. And then I'm hoping that the site could also become like a resource. So somebody who has no idea what design tokens even are in the first place could like kind of get a sense of what they are. And so that's another area we want to look at as well.
That's so cool, Gina. I love how you include the community in all sorts of design token and design system conversations. And I wanted to talk about how many of us who work on design systems find it challenging to receive recognition and advance in our careers. What do you think is the cause of this? And do you have any thoughts on how we can improve recognition and career advancement in design systems?
Yeah, it's definitely something I've faced in my career. I During my time at Salesforce, I think it took me like maybe 2 or 3 years. I forget exactly how many. It might have been like about 2 years before I think people actually recognized it and like actually promoted people on my team, and some of my team even were like nominated for like an internal award thing. But like part of that had to do with the manager that we had at the time, which his name is we called him Topher. It was Christopher, but he had started as a designer on the team and had like moved up into being the manager. And he was really passionate about like developing our careers, and he was a really good advocate for us. And I loved the metaphor that he used, and it stuck with me, which was, as he was advocating for our promotions, he would tell people like, people on this team are like the bass player of a band. It's like they might not be like seen as like the front person of the band. Usually the correlation to that would be like, lead designers that are working on some feature that's going out to the customer. Like the work we were doing was seen as like supporting that work, but he was like, you need the bass player. Otherwise, the band might not feel like it's moving along properly, and like, the lead singer or the lead guitarist, kind of needs that foundation to express upon. So anyway, I thought it was a cool metaphor, and it worked because both the other designer on the team and I got promoted, which was really nice because it was like, oh, okay, people are starting to get like our value in this. I do feel that this is something that probably a lot of people struggle with. When any type of work that's seen as like supporting doesn't get like as much of notice, I guess, like from leadership. And so like I think it's really important to not just have a manager that can advocate for you, but to also be able to advocate for yourself and like be able to speak to the value that you're bringing.
I like that you mentioned the different types of customers, right? We have
Mhm.
external customers, which are end users. Then we have like internal customers, which would be people using the design system to develop these experiences. But ultimately, I mean, the work that we do in design systems gets to an external user. So it's kind of interesting when we're talking about those different audiences and how we get recognition. And I love that you had a manager that really fought for recognition and promotions. And it sounds like the work that y'all were doing was being recognized. I'm just curious, do you see a difference in terms of what a career path or career progression looks like on an internal team like design systems versus like a product team? Are there things that can help convince leadership of the benefits because you're like one step removed from a product team?
I remember when I was at Salesforce, there were there was like work being done on talking about career ladders. So whether you were like an IC designer or a manager, and then the IC side was kind of like broken down into whether you were like a UX engineer or a design system designer or like a product designer, researcher, various types of roles within our org. And it would show the parallel paths of like what was expected for each of those. What I thought was interesting was, um, at least as far as I know, our team wasn't really involved in discussing what should be on those ladders, or I don't know if ladder is the right word. It was more horizontal than vertical, but um, yeah, it was interesting because it was like I guess like leadership kind of like taking a like having a take on like what was expected, and we would get feedback, but it was like um still at that time I feel like as a full-time role relatively a new thing. uh, so it's interesting to see it from that side of things. To fast forward to when I was at Asana, I was a manager, and then we as a group were kind of doing the same thing, like putting together like um what the career progression would look like for the different roles. And I initially was advocating for like a unique path for design system people, but then after some discussion, we realized that a lot of the things that a design system designer would be doing versus what a product designer would be doing have so many overlaps that it was like, well, if we're looking at this as not a checklist, but just like a range of things that um, you should generally be hitting, then we can actually have the same path for both. And it's like, maybe one person might not hit all the things a design system person would hit and vice versa, but generally they're still following the same path. So it was interesting to like, I guess like have my mind changed on that, like now being on the other side.
A lot of that resonates with me as well in terms of there's a lot of overlap that you don't think about because when your head's down in the system, it just feels like a completely different universe sometimes compared to what other feature teams are working on. So you mentioned before working on documentation and working to make sure that teams understand design tokens as a language, which I think is great. I was wondering, how does someone validate the current worth of a design system within an organization?
I think it's subjective, and I hate to use the cliche, it depends, but it definitely feels like an depends thing. And I think it largely has to do with what the people in your org are aiming for or valuing. And so like, I think a lot of people when they talk about design systems, they usually talk about efficiency and, you know, ship more things faster or like save money by, getting the work done quicker. And I feel like that's actually um, harder to track than you would think because it's like, if you're actually shipping these faster, then that extra time you're just filling in with more work. Like, So it's like, how do you really like judge that? Especially with everything getting quicker and quicker with all these tools and stuff. Um, the thing I found more valuable, which might be um, something some people disagree with, because I've actually seen people say they don't agree with this, but like when I'm talking to leadership, I find, they you could try all day trying to sell them on like efficiency and maintainability. But like what they really want to hear about is that end user experience, not just about the workers on design system, but they want to hear about the impact. And so I like to focus more on like the quality of the product. So I think part of the reason this is debated is because, people are like, oh, well, like, how do you even know like what is quality? Which, you know, my time at Asada, I actually worked on creating a design quality criteria. And I think that's the critical thing, is to have a criteria to look at and point at and like aim for. Um, and so if you have that, then, and you can speak to the product goals, you can say like, oh, we want to improve this or this for the user. Well, doing these things in design systems is going to lead us there. Uh, and so I try to speak more to that. And if I do have to talk about efficiency, I, like, I might use words like accelerate, which I think sound good to an exec, but really I lean more towards the quality side of things, especially if you have something like, oh, we need to remediate everything to be accessible. You can use that as like a talking point when you're selling the value. It's like, oh, well, we can, help get us there by like improving a lot of the things in our design systems accessible. Obviously, it's not going to fix everything, but it's going to get us a good chunk of the way there. And so speaking to that, I feel like holds more weight, at least from my point of view.
Yeah, I love how you were talking about speaking the language of like executives. I always talking about like how you have to kind of have like that business vocabulary, like accelerate, you know, KPIs, because at the end of the day, people only care about like the business impact, and the more you link what you do in design systems with the business impact, then the more people gonna get buy into it. The next question I'm gonna talk about is kind of like challenges. For some people outside of design systems, they think design systems are all sunshine and rainbows, but obviously it's not always the case. I'm wondering, what are some of the challenges you've encountered along the way, and how did you overcome them?
Hmm. I feel like over the course of my career, I've had a lot of challenges. I think I already kind of spoke to the whole like, people seeing my work as more of a supporting thing. I think I talked about it in a very positive way because we ended up getting promoted, but like that was a journey and it took some time to get there. Um, I think because of people not sometimes understanding what it is um, that design systems are, you find that, or at least I have found that sometimes you end up uh, sort of as like a catch-all of like taking on things that I guess people deem like, oh, you've got time because you're just doing design systems. And so like a couple examples of that, like on the IC side, I remember it, our organization at the time hadn't had design ops yet. And so like our team would take on all sorts of stuff. And it was like, like, oh, we want an onboarding kit for new designers and what's going to go in that kit and how do we distribute it and stuff. Like for some reason that was a team task. Or like, like, oh, we have this big thing that we want to do at Dreamforce. Can you drop what you're doing and like help us with all the presentation decks and like, like you just find yourself doing a bunch of other stuff. And I think like that was part of like growing pains. And then obviously during the course of my time at Salesforce, they did end up hiring specific people to do those type of tasks. And so then we focus on uh, the actual design business work. Um, another example, more on the manager side that I saw was, like during my time at Asana, but there was this feature that was really important to the business, and our team was put to task to work on it because I guess at the leadership level, they decided that our team had the bandwidth to do it. But it became a conversation because it was like, okay, well, we promised you X, Y, and Z. And so I just want you to understand that by us taking this on, you're not going to get X, Y, and Z, at least not in the time frame that we promised it. And so, it worked out. Like, we did the thing. It succeeded in doing what it needed to do. And, we got back on track, even though we just had to extend our timeline a bit. But it's just something I've seen where it's like, you have to make people understand that you're not like extra help. Like, I mean, I don't know that came out right. Like, obviously you want to help your organization. That's why you're on design systems in the first place. But I guess what I mean is like, it's not like we're sitting on the sidelines waiting to be like tagged in. It's like, no, like we've got our own roadmap. We've got our things that we're doing, and it's all contributing and helping. But like, it can be challenging, especially when it comes to like delivering on the things that you've promised when, you're also trying to like be helpful too. It becomes like a balancing game.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I feel like I've been doing that lately where it's like reactionary work, where it's like, hey, y'all don't have anything to do. Like, I have this thing that I need like right now. Can you just like jump on it, just like build it? It should be easy for you. And I kind of compare it to like, you want to act more as like a consultant than like an actual like server, because it's like you want to be able to kind of push people to the direction, make them feel empowered versus like them relying on you. But it's always a balancing act overall. So, um, yeah. So the next question I have is just kind of a general, like, design systems. There's so many things to talk about, so many things to cover, so many things to learn. How do you stay motivated and continue uh, being excited about your career and the discipline that you're in?
I feel like directly linked to whether I feel like I'm learning. If I'm learning a new thing, then I get kind of excited about it. And, um, like it, especially if I feel like I'm getting good at that thing, whatever that thing is. But if I feel like it's kind of like tedious work, like I've done this thing and, we're not really progressing, or, uh, it just feels like, well, yeah, tedious is the only word I can think of. Then I notice that my motivation drops. And so I think what I try to do in anything I'm doing is see if I can find the thing that I'm going to like learn or try to apply. And sometimes it might not be me doing all the learning, but it's like learning and sharing. So like we're all learning. I get really excited about that when that's happening. I mean, it's like the whole design tokens thing at Salesforce. So that was such a learning thing. And it was really exciting to be a part of that. Um, I will say things that hmm, sorry, might have to edit this part out because I'm like trying to formulate like what I'm thinking. But um so that's the motivation side of things, just thinking about like continuing to grow. I find that like I kind of go back and forth a little bit. And so like, starting out in my career, I was doing my designs and stuff in Photoshop and then building it after. And then at some point in my career, I switched it up to like just do it directly in code. And then because of the nature of doing design systems work, I was working a lot and like initially like coded designs, but then moving into leadership, then you find yourself not really in design tools as much anymore. Like you're in docs and spreadsheets. But like now I feel like it's kind of come full circle because like I've been like really digging into using design tools again. And I like even been taking a Figma course, which has been great, by the way. Like there's all this stuff I'm learning that I'm like, man, like if all this was out when I had first started, like this would have all felt like, oh, it's solved. I don't need to figure this out on my own as part of my career journey. And so it's interesting to think about, like, because when I was starting out, like, all this stuff was new, and we were all figuring it out, and now it's all kind of a thing that we do now. And so anyway, it's just kind of like a thing I think about sometimes, where it's like, where would I even be right now if all this was already in existence back then?
That's a great point. I think because when a lot of us were starting out, as you mentioned, like these tools were being created as we were all learning together. Do you have seasons where you focus more on the design side? Do you try and balance both, technical learning as well? How do you manage both sides of that so that you don't get burnt out?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, and maybe this is largely because of being a hybrid. Um, I don't know that what I'm about to say would apply to all designers or even all front end developers, but because I like to code and design, I do think it is kind of nice to have the ability to switch it up and like do different things. I think um, like a big part of my design system journey was more on the technical side. And, when was at Apple, I was a visual designer. Um, that was when I switched over from front end. Um, and so like now, like as I'm thinking through like what I want to work on, it's like I've been trying to like get back into doing visual again, and which is why like I'm, exploring more design tool centric workflows now. I do feel like with things like like designing, like maybe visual design in particular, like you do get a little bit rusty, and it's like a muscle that you have to kind of like keep exercising. And so like I definitely feel like I'm in that like learning mode again of um like thinking back like what I've learned. And of course, obviously visual trends change all the time. So like what was popular back then is definitely not going to fly now. Um, but yeah, it keeps things interesting. And, I'm sure at some point then I'll want to like jump back into code again. It's nice to have like that um, in reach to do that. Um, I don't really know what the answer would be though for somebody who's like just designed or like just development this. For me, I think it keeps me motivated to be a hybrid.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like when you're like a hybrid, you kind of forced to have that like beginner mindset where you're just like always curious about like specific things. And I think it's always good to kind of like we mentioned where it's like you have seasons where it's like, all right, I'm into animations. Oh, wait, I'm kind of interested now like how the web works or what like that. So it's like I feel like that's one of the things I enjoy about our industry where it's like there's always more stuff to learn and whatnot. Um, the next question I have is like, let's say someone's listening to this and like, cool, I want to be just like Gina. I want to be an awesome design system designer, hybrid, whatnot. What is the one piece of advice you would give them?
Well, first of all, don't try to be me. Just kidding. I would say like if you are a hybrid, I would try to do a little bit of exercise in the different areas that you have skills in, just so that you don't feel like you're rusty and like, almost like relearning things. That's something that I wish I could have gone back and like kept that up with myself. Um, and obviously, um, obviously you're gonna have like the work on your plate that you have to focus on. But like if you have downtime, it's okay. Then maybe you can jump into the other thing just to kind of keep that exercise going. Also, I I can't really like speak enough to the value of like networking with other people that do what you do. Like the design system Slack is super valuable. Like so many people will post questions in there and level up and with each other, which is really great. Obviously you have like meetups and conferences as well, but like I really feel like, nobody's alone in this anymore. Like there's literally like, I think it's 5 figures of people in that Slack. And so you have a network at your, I don't want to say disposal, but like you have a network there that you can um, like anything, like whether it's like leveling up in code, leveling up in design, or even just like learning about like career journey stuff. Like there's so many people in there that can like help share their experiences. So I think that's like, probably one of the most valuable things is to tap into the network.
I love it. Yeah, I would definitely recommend folks going to the design system Slack, because I've learned so much just by people posting things. Not so. Um, as you talk about that, um, next question is like, how can folks find you, and do you have anything else you want to plug?
Um, yeah, so I'm still on Twitter, and yes, I'll still call it Twitter. Um, so Jina, Jina. And I'm that on a lot of different platforms, so like GitHub and even on Figma as Jina. Um, I am on LinkedIn, but I will admit I only do connections with people I've worked with or can vouch with. But like, if you wanted to follow my posts, I've started sharing there a little bit more. And obviously in the design system Slack. And then in terms of things to plug, I'm starting to think about the next Clarity, which haven't announced anything yet, but that'll be obviously later this year. So I guess if you just keep an eye on either my accounts or the Clarity accounts on social, you'll find out when that is ready. And then kind of cool that we're talking about career stuff because there's this really cool person that I'm co-authoring a book with about navigating a career journey in design systems. I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Adekunle. But yeah, so you can keep an eye on both of us for any updates on that.
Damn, that sounds like a cool ass name. Definitely. Yeah, thanks for plugging that. Thank you, Gina, for being part of today's conversation. I feel like it's been very valuable. We also want to thank our listeners for tuning in to today's episode. For more content, feel free to view previous episodes on our website, codeandpixels.fm. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter. And for any updates about upcoming episodes, or maybe we will be looking for a sponsorship. So putting it out there into the universe. And also connect this with social media at Code and Pixels FM. Thank you again, Gina, for participating, and wishing everyone have a good and fantastic day.
Thank you.